Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. It's December 3rd of 2022 and it's 2:30 a.m. in the morning. I've been rearranging things again. Uh, I'm not having any of the static problems, that type of thing. Uh, however, I've disconnected the second camera. I'm using uh, the Razer Pro, and and I'm using a microphone. I'm using that microphone on it. So, uh, what else? I'm sure something has happened. I can't think of anything. Let's see. I need to get my new medicine thing so I can start starting the third day of the month. Well, let's pop over here and see what's going on my main display. The pressure cooker, I got 24 views in 14 hours. By the way, please subscribe and click the flag or whatever it is, so every time I do a video you'll be notified. I'll have to listen to this and see how the audio and everything is working out. The microphone, the audio system is not bad on this Razer, but I do want to use, oh, it's not showing. Sorry. Oh. I do want to use, say, this or something else. I really don't want to use the microphone that's built into, a webcam. And let's see, Today is Saturday. It's the 3rd of December. This month will be over. This year will be over. Another year older. 31 days in the month. I have, see if I can swing this around here without knocking it off. See how far I can go. Okay, there. I have about 4 of those umbrella type lights. With the umbrella that I could put up. I also really, don't want this thing. I don't even want it in my room, but it won't work out in the kitchen for me. I'm not sure what to do with that. One thing possibly I could do is the two, I call them desks, but they're actually tables. but they're were inexpensive, and from Amazon. These desks or these tables, which I use as a desk, incredibly easy to put together, and especially I have got arthritis really bad, and it was super easy. I just put the the top on the bed, on the mattress back there, upside down, and then there was 4 legs, and I just set them down, and then I just tightened them down with a hex wrench, and that was it. And I could get another one and put it, over there, and that would be, I could put the, and maybe something else to use. But on the other hand, I'd like to have tools laid out. I've got a bunch of tools that I'd like to put out, spread out over there, or stacked up sort of, so I could get access to them when I need access to them. I do have my tools in a drawer in the living room, and I don't know if you've ever seen I think not, the living room here. What was nice was, when I moved from Miami to Fort Worth, Texas, to the apartment complex that my ex-wife she lives here. We decided that, but when I moved here, she was using apartment C or whatever, and I moved into the apartment I moved into what was available. It was one above her, and that was with my grandson and myself, and so we had the 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment right above Darlene, my ex-wife, and our son, who was living with her at that time. And after X number of years, Hillary, our daughter, who was married and living in Sweden, she moved back to the United States. And so she came and moved into this apartment complex, and didn't get an apartment in the same, building, but another building where we could actually see, each other's patios and stuff. And so when she moved, of course, her son, my grandson, he went to live with her, and so I had this apartment. I moved into above, and that was okay. But it's a good thing that I did finally eventually. I say, let's see. No, at that point, that's before Hillary moved, before Russell's mother moved. So we were living upstairs. So then we, of course, from time to time here, there's pretty good, and I think in all these apartment complexes in West Fort Worth, West Fort Worth is where there was a SAC base, and a lot of people, worked on the base or in the military and whatever, and it was, I guess, doing well, and they were building more apartments and things for people, and then it was deactivated and just became a reserve base. It's still in operation, but there are Group 4 Reserve Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, fighter groups that are stationed there, and they do training and that type of stuff. And then there's other stuff going on that I don't probably know about. They didn't consult me. But then when Hillary came, then, or was it before? No, it was before. No, Hillary came. So then Russell moved in, into an apartment in this complex. And then, so I had upstairs, but then Russell was still living with me, So I told him, hey, why don't we get it was $100 more a month than a, one bedroom, one bathroom. The 2-bedroom, 2-bath was $100 more a month. And so I told him, let's move. And he didn't really want to move. He just wanted to play his video games and work. And anyway, I inquired, and this was available, 2-bedroom tube. So we moved into here. It's a good thing that I moved, because upstairs, these stairs are, I'm not sure they're any steeper, but anyway, before long I would have had trouble getting up the stairs. Now I don't know what, and if I was living in an apartment here and living upstairs, I don't know what I would do. I mean, it would be hilarious to watch. I mean, sad, hilarious, So it's a good thing I moved out, but I didn't move out for health reasons. I moved out. But anyway, when Russ and I moved in here, he was in his, room. I was in my room. There was nothing in the living room, nothing. And it was mint condition. And there wasn't much we did in the kitchen. I mean, we cooked, but there wasn't much neat and everything else. Then when, costs just keep going up and going up, and Hillary moved in, and then Russell went, so it was just me, a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment, and then my ex-wife and my grown son moved in over here, and with a cat. I like cats. I like dogs more, but I wouldn't want to be walking, and have to pick up after them, which is what you have to do here, in this apartment complex. You have to go pick up their poop, Plus it's hard for me to get out, and with my medical problems, But anyway, we moved in. They moved in over here in order to save cost, instead of paying for, 2 Netflix and 2 Hulus and all this kind of stuff, in addition to the rent and everything, and the cable and all that kind of stuff. Helped Darlene and myself money-wise. But of course, just recently, food prices and everything have been, skyrocketing, and everything's been going up in cost. And now, the kitchen is, and the laundry room and everything is not neat. And the living room as it is has, the cat is coughing up, from time to time, hacking up a hairball or something. And I'm, pretty well. That's the reason the place was neat before, like mint condition, even after I had lived here for years. It's because I never never put anything in the living room, never lived in the living room. Now I'm confused. confined to this place, and it's like a prison. I mean, everything. Well, I guess I don't know what a prison is like, but it's small. I mean, now, I could do some things if I had, the money. Like I mentioned, that table. I think it was $119. I could get another one of those over. Then I can put some stuff on top of that. But I do have a small refrigerator in here, one of those small ones. When I worked when I worked 9 years hospital security, I purchased. There was just two of us, two security officers. We didn't work at the same time. We worked. Night shift was covered. That's all. Before that, many years before that, working full-time hospital security and working part-time for a Burns, Pinkerton, Wells Fargo, something like that, contract guard agency. I swore at some point that I was never going to work a security job that didn't have security around the clock. But then, of course, when they built the small hospital out in my little hometown, where I could just about see the mobile home that I lived in from the hospital, I wanted, of course, to work out there, and did for 9 years. But there was something I was going to tell you, but I forgot what it was having to do with that. Can't remember now what it was. I don't know why this popped in my mind. I was a hospital security officer for 30 years. Now, for a few years before that, I worked contract security, Burns, Pinkerton, Wells Fargo, or something. Then I had 1 year that I had a patrol service. It was just me and my car, and that was it. And we brought in money, and everything was pretty good. Now, of course, I patrolled every night, and then during the daytime, I went out and signed up businesses or whatever, and we did all right. The problem was we weren't taking in enough money to really have the insurance that we should have had, and nothing happened, luckily, and then also we didn't have the money to purchase a new vehicle. And really what I would like to have done is had two vehicles, one for the patrolling and then one for just us to use for whatever we needed to use it for. But we had one vehicle, and I knew that we just weren't taking enough money that we could just go out and buy one, or that we could buy and make payments on. We could have met the payments on a new vehicle. But now I could have done what the other patrol companies did, private patrol. Like I worked for a while for a contract security company that did patrols, and that's about all they did. I mean, they might have had a few accounts where they had a security officer there, but it was and they had quite a few. I'm not sure how many. I never counted them. Maybe I'm going to guess 9 patrol cars. And I think that they looked like cabs back in those days, sort of. They looked like cabs. One really neat thing about them is that they had, the spotlight, they went through the roof, Police departments and other places didn't want to, deal with, get a car and then have a spotlight, they want the spotlight to go not through the roof, whatever. But that worked out great. You could just grab that thing and you knew instantly, where you were shining it or whatever. But what that company did is, I worked for them, and I don't know what the population of Overland Park, Kansas, but it's a big, next to Kansas City, Missouri. It's a big place, and it was sort of a more wealthy community. People there had, made a little more money. But I patrolled all of Overland Park, I patrolled all of Overland Park, and the salesman would sign up anybody. The guy who went out and signed up the accounts, he just went out, because he made money signing up these accounts, and he signed up every car dealer along Metcalf Avenue, and there was a bunch. Just think of all the, and then he would sign up. He signed up. And he did these things before, but I would have had no choice. I mean, he signed up a hospital, or what would it have been? I'm not sure exactly what it was. It was a multi-story, like a hospital, but I think it might have been for elderly people or something like that. But he told them that I would be there, when they got off duty at 7 p.m. or something like that, and then at 11, I think some people, and he told them, he signed up a tavern. Actually, that wasn't in, that was outside of, that was a tavern right next to the Olathe Naval Air Station. So there was, Marines and I guess Navy there, mainly Marines or whatever, and that he signed them up with the condition that I would go in there when they closed. I think that was like 2 a.m. So I had to be there at 2 a.m. and then go in and then tell everybody, okay, closing time. Now the guy who, for a little bit before me, I think he quit or got fired, I don't know which, security officer, he said, when you go out there, he says, be sure and take your nightstick in. So there was I didn't get any real orientation. That was just a guy that, hey, he told me. It wasn't the company gave me any kind of, I didn't get any orientation. It was like, handled it. So anyway, when the first night or whatever, when I went there and pulled up in front, and I thought, there's going to be a bunch of Marines in there. And I said, that guy told me to take my nightstick in. Now, he wasn't the guy that told me he wasn't a supervisor or anything. Maybe he was. Maybe that was the deal. Maybe he was a supervisor. And that's the only advice or anything that he gave. They didn't even give me a good list of where the accounts were. I was finding out there as time went on. Well, I didn't know that was to be patrolled, It was a mess. But, my point in that regard is that they used, I think even for Kansas City, Missouri, 1 million people, they would sign up, they had another officer that took care of that. And they didn't have 2 officers, they had 1, so it didn't work. But, so that's how now they made enough money to, buy another vehicle or more if they needed it. But anyway, they had some nice big, they were sort of like, reminded me of some kind of cabs that I've seen, maybe in the UK or something. I can't remember what kind of vehicle it was. And yeah, there was so many. Oh, anyway, the the tavern, the bar. I think the law was that they had to close at 2 a.m. So anyway, I pulled up front, and I thought, the only thing they told me about this job was when I went in there, I thought, I'm not going in there with a bunch of Marines, or even if they weren't Marines, even if I was a Boilermaker for years and years, and a welder for years and years, I wasn't a big intimidating person ever, Well, I'm not intimidating now, that's for sure. But and of course, I'm not a drinker. Both my parents were drinkers. I was used to drunks, and whatever. But so I didn't take my nightstick in. I went in. I went in, and the guy, the Marines or whatever in there. Hi. And I thought I don't know whether they were sitting there waiting for me to come in, And when I came in, I was very thin then. The military wouldn't take me because I was 40 pounds out of the minimum weight requirement. Barney Fife, that would be a perfect, so I went in and everything, and then, I got there a little bit early, and, okay, it's 2 a.m., sorry, bar's closing, and a big young Marine came over to me, and he said, what did he say? He said, I don't think I'm going to leave. What are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I'm sorry. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that, because I've got to make sure this place closes up and everybody leaves. So I'm afraid we're going to have problems. And so then he went and sat back down, So then what I did is every time somebody stood up, I just took their chair and turned it over on the table, and then when he got up, I just did the same thing. And then when he left, he came over and he said, I forget, he came over and he said, good night, he said something. He didn't say, good night, I'm going to meet you outside, or he didn't say anything threatening or anything like that. He said, good night, have a good night, he left. And I never had a problem for the short time that I did that job. Never had a problem with, anybody in that bar. But then later I started my own patrol service, and I took, that was the other point. I lived out in the south part of Kansas City, Missouri, and I took an area that would be, a small area. I sold to signed up people, and in that small area, and at night I could sit and have the window rolled down, and I could hear glass breaking or something like that. I could hear a car speeding blocks away, or I did it the correct way. I have one regret that I think about from time to time. There was actually the road, or the highway, or right off of the highway, there was an intersection that used to have a tavern that was there for years and years and years, right at an intersection there of the highway, ramps off from the highway and onto the highway, and it was a tavern, and it was owned by the father of the woman that I she remembers kind of like growing up there and everything. And he started out with a restaurant that people really liked his cooking, and I don't think he had any, people, they liked his cooking, and then he just finally realized, it's better to sell him a shot of whiskey or something than it is to, make him a chicken dinner or something. And now my ex-wife says that she thinks she was like 5 years old and she got polio, and she says that people loved her father's cooking, and the place was very popular. But when she got polio, the word went around, and people didn't want to go and eat there, and so he went to a bar. And anyway, I've never been a drinker ever. I never went to the bar or anything. But anyway, he had to move the highway people or whatever were making an exchange in there of ramps and things right there. And so at some point he was told, I'm not sure how it worked out, but he had to move his bar, and then he moved it out, out south little areas, and where I lived, and I don't think I was ever in the bar ever. I must have been in there once or twice for some reason. But anyway, when I took over this patrol service, that area where he had to move his tavern, there was a liquor store right there. I guess was like next to his bar, or maybe it wasn't there, but it was a liquor store, and it was kind of in a bad spot. I mean, right, the perfect place. Maybe I shouldn't give you any ideas, but the perfect place to be robbed. I mean, highway, a ramp going right to, Kansas, a ramp going right, taking you onto the highway to go, out of Kansas City, Missouri, and it was, and these people too were working, until 2 o'clock in the morning or something or other. And so anyway, I pulled in there to sign them up. They didn't call me. Nobody ever called me. I ran an ad occasionally in a local paper, weekly paper, an ad, and it showed a picture of Merchant Security Service badge, and it said arrest vandalism or something like that. Arrest, not arrest, but like the word arrest meaning stop or whatever, something like that. And then I called on people. So I went in there, and there was a man and woman working. I went in there maybe like 7 p.m. or something. I might have told this story before. Funny how some things affect you more than, I went in and asked, to speak to the owner or whatever, and they said, well, he's not here. And I think somebody, well, of course I was in uniform and armed and everything, of course, but I think they said, or maybe I said, I'm here to see if I could sign the place up, in patrol. And they both, it was moving, especially, they said, oh, please, our boss comes in at, the owner comes in at 1 a.m. or something like that, or 2 a.m. Could you please, could you come back in and talk to him, because we really feel like we would really like to have a patrol service, whatever. And I said, sure. So I came in, that night, and the owner was there, of course, and he wanted absolutely no part of it. No, not interested. And I didn't argue with him or anything like that, but I tried to say, really, and I said it doesn't, the patrol service, which it didn't. That's one thing that we didn't, we charged, that's another reason that we charged a reasonable price, And I knew, I didn't say that, but I knew that with the area that I had, and with the fact that I knew that they would be closing at about 2 a.m., I mean, I couldn't go there and sit there when they were closing up at 2 a.m. every morning, I'd have to be a little bit random, or else somebody would know, okay, well, this security officer, he's right there at 2 a.m. So I can go out there and, break into Smith's secretarial service, or I can do such and such, I couldn't, but I would have been there, and not just at 2 a.m. If somebody did stake the place out and think, hey, and if they'd sat in a parking lot or whatever, they would have seen me patrolling irregularly, at random times and that kind of stuff. So anyway, the owner was a real asshole, and I left. And then with what happened later on, I wish that I had, but I don't think I could have dealt with the guy. I think the owner would have still said, I would have said, hey, I'll patrol you, for a month. You don't have to pay. At the end of the month, if you think this is worth it or whatever, then you can pay X amount, whatever. But I know he was, not a nice guy. So it was a week or two later on the local news, at about 6 a.m. in the morning or something like that. I guess probably just before the maybe police officers that patrolled, were finishing up their shift. I guess they thought they should check the doors or something on their business, the businesses or something. Because right about 6 in the morning they found the place unlocked and the two people gone. And then they, after I forget how long it took, then they found their bodies. The place had been robbed, and instead of tying them up or instead of just driving, whatever, they must have taken them with them and then killed them away from the place. Because I doubt that they shot and killed them and then loaded them in their vehicle, carried them out and loaded them in their vehicle or something. So I feel bad about that. I mean, I shouldn't. I know I didn't do anything wrong. I leaned over backwards to do the right thing. And I know it would not have done any good telling the guy, hey, I'll patrol. And I would have patrolled. I would have done a really good job, because I always did a good job when I did that kind of stuff. All my jobs, except maybe when I worked at the post office. I had a chip on my shoulder, I think. One, I took the civil service exam and passed and was on the list to be a career clerk, I think it was. I think that's what they called it. And but it wasn't the post office's fault, it was Congress's fault at that time. Congress made all the decisions about the post office. Now, if you work at the post office, you're saying, well, no, we have a, if you work there, we have a private commission or whatever. Yeah, now you did later, years later. At that time, Congress totally decided everything. But then eventually they decided it'd be better to have a private agency which has to get, marching orders really from the, Congress or whatever. So, but anyway, so I think it was like 2 years. I was working as a Boilermaker. I was working as a Boilermaker, and then I eventually was heading for Pascagoula, Mississippi, from Kansas City, Missouri, to work in the shipyards there. But before I got there, I knew there was a union hall in forget where it was, but I went there instead of going to Pascagoula, Mississippi, and asked if they had any jobs. Of course, they had jobs for welders, union jobs. So they sent me over to have the welding test done. And you weld like you weld a piece. You did several things. You had to weld like overhead and stuff like that too. But you put a couple pieces together. Well, the technician there put the pieces of metal together, and then you weld them. You weld it, and then I'm not sure if they X-rayed it also. Maybe they might have X-rayed one of them, and then they bent it. Put it in a machine. It bends it. And it better not break where the weld was. It better break someplace else, So I passed the test, and then went to Pascagoula, Mississippi. I think must have been the union hall. Must have been it almost came to Biloxi. No, anyway, I was sent to Pascagoula, Mississippi. I'd never been on a construction job, for the Boilermakers before. I mean, I worked in different shops, and but I knew enough to know, because I, bought a book on when I knew I was going to be working someplace outside of Kansas City. My father, I had helped him as growing up in high school and everything. He was fighting to clean up the union. Not from the mafia, or what it would be a crime syndicate or whatever, but from the guy who was elected, was a Mason. And Masons do, a lot of charitable work, all kinds of stuff, but this guy was, elected to be the business agent, and then there was 2 assistant business agents. And even out on the jobs then, like the Boilermakers Local 83, covered 4 states. And anyway, I helped my father, fight corruption in the union. Oh, I was going to say, even in Iowa or whatever, if there was a Mason, a guy who was a member of the Masons, a Boilermaker, he would be maybe the supervisor, or the welding supervisor. He'd get some kind of a thing. And my dad was, of course, a Catholic. He didn't go to church. Well, he actually, when he graduated from grade school, my father went with his friend to the seminary, and his friend that he grew up with stayed in the seminary and became a priest, and ended up going back to the same St. Vincent's in Kansas City, Missouri, where my father and him grew up together, and we're all my father's 7 brothers and 3 sisters. They went to the school, and to St. Vincent's and everything. But so anyway, my father was, and I was helping him. I think I might have been in grade school. I know it was in high school before. I think it was in grade school. I made posters and did all kinds of stuff to help him, hand out material to hand out, all that kind of stuff. And my father got elected as one of the positions in like Robert's Rules of Order or whatever, president, vice president, sergeant of arms, or whatever the things were. And so then he was made one of the 2 business agents, and I helped my father after that with putting stuff that was sent to him in a manual from the Labor Relations Board or whatever. But anyway, backing up again. When I went, so my father would never, show me preference, and I would never ask my father to show me any kind of preference. And so, I mean, there was plenty of jobs for welders and stuff, and I didn't need my father's help. And but so far as getting a job out in the field where the pay was much better, that would be a nice job. And my father wouldn't, he wouldn't pull any strings for me, and I wouldn't ask him to do that. I wouldn't think of asking him to do it. So I went to, ended up in Convent, Louisiana. But I knew, I bought a book on knot tying and was practicing knot tying and everything before I went down, and because I knew that was one thing I needed. That was before OSHA, if you're outside the United States, in the United States, Occupational Safety Health thing that was passed. Republicans, right-wing people, they basically always on the wrong side. But there were some good Republicans in the older days. But they objected. They just threw, an agency that inspecting to make sure it's safe, and if there's an accident and somebody's hurt or killed or whatever, they come in and investigate. The government has no business, it's not in the Constitution that there's going to be an Occupational Safety Health Act or whatever. They just went crazy, But when I went, that was before the occupational safety group. You probably have seen refineries where you live, maybe, gigantic towers going up in the air. And there was just metal, piece of metal that was, somebody like me had welded on, and you just climbed up that. There was no cage around the thing. You didn't have a safety belt where you hooked onto the thing, and as you went up or you came down, that's OSHA did that, and other things were required. But anyway, I knew I needed to be able to tie knots. So I did that test, passed, welding test, and went out there and the first time, and after that, the first time, like they had two helpers assigned to help me, really wasn't much for them to do, maybe pull my cable or maybe get me some more welding rod or do something. But then they were young local boys, with Louisiana accent or whatever. And so anyway, we climbed up, and then they came up, they called, Mr. Howard. The only time in my life I've been called Mr., I guess. Mr. Howard, could you tie me off, And I thought, I said, sure. And I thought, oh my God, if they only knew that in the motel I was looking again at the manual, how to tie ropes, and I tied them, I tied them off on the thing so they didn't fall. I was so skinny still even then. I wonder if I weighed 119 pounds or 120 pounds or whatever. I was thin. But, I tied them off, and I was going to make a, okay. Well, I had applied, and taken the exam and passed for the post office. And for like 2 years or something like that, they never sent a card out or anything. They didn't, but I knew that Congress was refusing to allow them because the Republicans didn't want more people hired. And So anyway, when I left the job in Convent, Louisiana, and drove back home, my mail, I didn't owe anything. I was living with my parents until I got married. I was living then with my parents, and I was about 26 years old. No, wait a minute. No, I didn't marry her. Anyway, but my parents had my mail, and I didn't. There weren't any bills because there was a lot of shortwave listening, radio stuff, and all kinds of stuff like that. But this was a Friday. I got in on Friday night into Kansas City, Missouri, and a letter saying report Monday morning, for your post office, job as a career clerk. And so I went down there, and boom, there was 200 of us. They hired in 200, and 2 weeks later they hired in 200 more, and 2 weeks later they hired in 200 more, and then I quit about that time. But anyway, when I went down, I was pissed. It wasn't their fault. That all this time that it took, not a word from them. It just, I just luckily, I guess, or unluckily, showed up. Anyway, I went to work for them, and I was number 200, by the way, out of the 200 of that group. That at that time, they went by test scores. But if you were in the military, you got 10 points added on. If you were in combat, you got more points added. There was things like that, and I got no points, but I got hired in. But I was kind of pissed. And then too, I've heard of the word scheme. I'm sure you've heard of the words, scheme, somebody scheming, but that's the way it worked. I'm not sure if it still works that way or not, but I'm going to stop here and after 1 hour. That's how you got a different, job, how you got promoted in there. If you wanted to not be sorting mail, our 200 were hired in to sort mail for California. And so we had to learn, because maybe there was the boxes we were practicing on, or maybe there was 30 slots, maybe 30, maybe 40. I don't know, but you had to know, if mail for Santa Clara, Santa Ana, Santa, all these, you had to know, which slots they went in, and then you knew your scheme. But then if you wanted another job, something else, maybe a promotion or whatever, then you had to learn that scheme or whatever. And so I better speed this up here. And then too, you got 30 minutes for lunch. I was used to being a Boilermaker and a welder, being in a union. And so I went, for lunch in their cafeteria, and I was in the line, and I think almost the 30 minutes because they hired in 200, I think the 30 minutes were almost over. So when I sat down at the table, I looked at my watch, and okay, 30 minutes. And actually I get bored, I ate pretty fast, but so I didn't spend exactly 30 minutes, there. But I don't know, maybe 25 minutes sitting there or whatever. And then I got up and, went. So I was late. And when I went back, this was before the jokes went around, which wasn't funny. What does a flag at half staff at the post office mean? Means they're hiring, because there was there weren't school shootings in, and what we've always had, but there was post office employees got, God damn, and I guess they Anyway, when I'd go back, everybody else was back in my scheme, you know. And I'd come back and there were people like, oh my God, we might have another shooter. And then nobody, I'm making this up, you know, but still it was like, you know. So then after 6 weeks, or, you know, if they had hired me in as a mail handler, you know, as a postman going door to door, and I don't care what kind of neighborhood it would have been in, I'd probably still be working for the post office, you know, I would have stayed. But sorting mail for California or anything like that, I don't think they had any. But as a mailman, I would have stayed, I'm sure. Not till I'm 81. I'm not well. If I'd have stayed till I was 81 or even younger, I would have had to, you know, go to the door with people's mail and say, "Could I use your restroom to take a leak?" So that wouldn't have worked out very well. Oh, the other thing, when I went to, when they called me down to report that I was going to be working for the post office, there was a folder, I swear to God, you know, this thick, with some rules, you know, and stuff like that. There wasn't anything in there saying, you can't assault the United States Capitol, but there was things in there, page after page, that you had to check off I don't know if you had to check it off if you never were with them, or if you had to check it if you were, I don't know, but, and the one I remember is, of course, there was a whole bunch of them, they all sounded like, you know, sounded real patriotic and everything. And one was Abraham Lincoln Brigade. Have you ever been a member of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade? And I'm exaggerating and trying to be funny. I mean, I already knew the history of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade and the other groups like that I was reading. I knew, you know. I don't think anybody else saw that. I don't think the other 199 did. But you know, it was the Communist Party of the United States during the Depression and that kind of stuff. You know, tried to organize. It didn't really work out. I mean, during the Depression, they got a few more members, but the American people were not interested in. They were interested in democracy and America and our Constitution, and that is unlike today, you know. And but the communists would form like the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, and there'd be some communist in it, and then other people would join to, you know, fight Franco and to fight against Nazism, where Hitler was testing out Spain as see how his weapons and things, aircraft and stuff worked, all that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of Americans who were not interested in communism and all that went to fight early, you know, Nazism, and they were in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. And so if you were in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, you couldn't be working for the post office or any government, you know, agency. And that pissed me off about him. And then too, when they we were doing a little bit of, I think for the first 2 weeks maybe, we were basically in our training is learning California's mail system, or, you know, where mail went in the state. And then I think we started working the floor, and then nobody tested me. I mean, you know, they must have tested some of the others, and they decided we didn't know this California scheme, so we were going to go back to class and in the classroom, you know. And then that's what set me off. Yeah, they said, okay, well, you know, we're gonna have to go back. And I said, I'm not doing it. Oh, you have to do it. And I said, no, I don't. And I said, yes, you do. And I said, I'm quitting. And they were like thunderstruck, you know, like, what? This is a career civil service appointment. And I said, I don't care, because I've been working as a welder. I could quit a job on a Friday and have a job on welding, you know, on Monday. And in 2000 when I did the census, and we had, I think maybe that was the only time, and I happened to do the 2000 census. They had short forms, and I think like 7 or 8, and then there'd be one that was a long form. And I mean, it was a fucking long form, And, but then, I don't think there was any question about it. Well, anyway, when I did the form, I ran people who were retired, either maybe not retired from the post office or whatever. And they had nice houses and nice cars, and the ones that were retired had a nice pension. I'm sure that we were not required to ask them how much they made, but you wouldn't believe. But now, of course, you have, Americans who they know absolutely nothing about the Constitution, but they love the Constitution. They don't know anything about the Constitution. They don't know anything about our founding fathers. They don't know anything about separation of church and state. They don't know anything, and they're raving about. But they'll say, well, the income tax. It doesn't mention income tax in the Constitution of the United States. It doesn't mention, that I have to have a driver's license. I mean, they're wackos. And one of the few things that is that our founding fathers did a great job with, our Constitution. And one of the few things in there, and one of the few requirements was, there will be a census every 10 years. Everybody has to, the census has to be held. It has to be face to face, one-on-one, and everything. And so that's the way, that's the way it was. I guess I'll end this now. Thank you very much for watching. My stomach's growling. I need some breakfast.